Shedeur Sanders falling in the draft to the Cleveland Browns. Just a couple of things that I've been ruminating on for the last day. I understand that Deion Sanders worked at multiple TV networks. He worked, I think, at CBS, NFL Network. I understand that. A lot of people at that NFL Network building know Deion. But it is our job as broadcasters to cut through that and be honest with the audience. And I'm not going to call out anybody individually, but I thought it was really strange that all the draft coverage that I saw, as everybody was shocked, dismayed that Shedeur Sanders had fallen in the draft, nobody said, even mentioned, that maybe dad didn't help him out.
Shedeur Sanders fans, you're not going to believe what just happened to Colin Cowherd after he absolutely destroyed Shedeur's NFL interviews. This man went on national TV, called out our guy for having some of the worst interviews in NFL history, blamed Deion for hurting his son's draft stock, and now he's eating his words hard. I'm talking about a complete 180 that's got the entire NFL world shook. As someone who's been riding with Shedeur from day one, I had to break this down for you because what Colin just admitted is absolutely insane. We're talking about a media personality who just got exposed for not knowing what he was talking about. And honestly, it's about time someone called him out on his BS about our quarterback. But before we dive into Colin's complete meltdown, let me paint you the picture of what actually went down. You guys know I've been following Shedeur closely since his Colorado days, and I've been saying from day one that this kid has that special something. But Colin Cowherd, man, this dude went nuclear on Shedeur during the draft process. And I mean absolutely nuclear. Colin starts his entire rant by saying he's been ruminating, and I love how he uses these fancy words like he's some kind of intellectual about Shedeur falling to the Cleveland Browns. Right off the bat, he's acting like he's got some inside scoop, some deep knowledge that the rest of us don't have. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is where Colin starts digging his own grave. He immediately goes after Deion Sanders, saying that football dad has become pageant mom. I mean, come on, Colin. Are you seriously going to sit there and tell me that a Hall of Fame father supporting his son is somehow a bad thing? This is where I knew Colin was already off base. He's trying to make it sound like Deion was being overprotective or something. But let me ask you this, wouldn't you want your dad to have your back when you're entering the biggest moment of your career? But here's where Colin really starts, showing his true colors. He brings up how Deion was on multiple shows during Super Bowl week, setting parameters about where Shedeur would and wouldn't play. Now, I watched those interviews too, and you know what I saw. I saw a father who knows the NFL inside and out, who's played at the highest level, making sure his son doesn't end up in a toxic situation. That's not arrogance. That's wisdom, Colin keeps harping on this point, saying Deion was directing his comments at 7 or 8 teams that needed a quarterback, and that these were struggling franchises. But hold up, isn't that exactly what a good advisor should do? Why would you want your son to go into a dysfunctional organization when he could wait for a better opportunity? Colin's acting like this is some kind of crime, but in my opinion, it's just smart business.
He not only interviewed poorly, Todd McShay on his podcast for The Ringer acknowledged he named a name. Brian Daboll brought him in. Shedeur Sanders wasn't prepared on the whiteboard. When he called him out, Shedeur Sanders didn't take it well. So you may not like that there was anonymous coaches saying it was the worst interview ever. I can understand if you don't like that. That feels a little harsh. I get that. However, that doesn't make it untrue. There are multiple reports now, multiple teams that did not feel that Shedeur was engaged, that Shedeur made people feel small.
Now here's where Colin really goes off the rails, and this is the part that's going to make you mad. He starts talking about these anonymous reports about Shedeur's interviews, claiming they were some of the worst ever. He specifically mentions Brian Daboll and the Giants, saying Shedeur wasn't prepared on the whiteboard and didn't take it well when called out. But let me tell you something. I've been in this space long enough to know that anonymous sources are usually code for I'm making this up or I heard it from someone who heard it from someone. Colin's sitting there acting like he's got the inside scoop. But where's the proof? Where are the actual names willing to go on record? What really gets me is how Colin tries to have it both ways. He says he understands if people don't like the anonymous coach's reports because it feels a little harsh, but then he turns around and says that doesn't make it untrue. So which is it, Colin? Either you believe the reports or you don't. You can't sit there and hedge your bets like some kind of political pundit. The thing that's really bothering me about Colin's take is how he's completely ignoring the context. This is a kid who's been under a microscope his entire college career, dealing with more pressure and scrutiny than probably any other quarterback in recent memory. And Colin's going to judge him based on some anonymous reports from teams that probably weren't even serious about drafting him. Colin keeps going on about how quarterbacks are different, how they need to have leadership and maturity and focus. And you know what? He's right about that. But then he completely contradicts himself by praising other quarterbacks who've had their own issues. He mentions Johnny Manziel and Baker Mayfield, talking about how he was tough on them for maturity issues. But here's the thing. Shedeur has never had the off-field problems that those guys had. What really exposes Colin's bias is when he starts talking about the legendary decorations in Shedeur's draft room and calls it cringy. Are you kidding me? This is a kid who's worked his entire life to get to this moment, and Colin's going to criticize him for being confident, for believing in himself. That's not cringy. That's the mindset of a champion. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is where Colin starts to show his true colors. He mentions that he's been getting texts from people not in football asking about Deion's comments. So let me get this straight. Colin's entire analysis is based on text from people who don't even work in the NFL. That's your source, Colin. Random people texting you. The more Colin talks, the more it becomes clear that he's not actually criticizing Shedeur based on his play or his actual abilities. He's criticizing him because he doesn't like Deion's approach. He's letting his personal feelings about prime time cloud his judgment about the kid's actual talent. And let's talk about that talent for a second, because this is where Colin really starts to contradict himself. Later in his rant, he admits that he thinks Shedeur is a very accurate kid that moves well and that he thinks he's a franchise quarterback. He even says he wouldn't have had a problem if Cleveland or Pittsburgh drafted him. So if you think he's a franchise quarterback, Colin, why are you spending 20 minutes tearing him down? What really gets me is how Colin tries to play both sides. He'll spend 10 minutes talking about how Shedeur had terrible interviews and his dad hurt his draft stock, but then he'll turn around and say he actually likes the kid as a player. It's like he's trying to cover all his bases so he can claim he was right no matter what happens. The celebrity backup quarterback argument is probably the weakest part of Colin's entire rant. He keeps talking about how teams don't want a celebrity backup and uses Tim Tebow as an example, but here's the thing. Shedeur isn't Tim Tebow. Tebow was a running quarterback who couldn't throw. Shedeur is a pocket passer with elite accuracy. The comparison doesn't even make sense. Colin keeps going on about how backup quarterbacks should be able to put on a baseball hat and sunglasses and walk through the mall without being recognized. But in 2024, with social media and the way college football is covered, every top quarterback is going to have some level of recognition. That's just the reality of the modern game. What really exposes Colin's lack of understanding is when he starts talking about the Cleveland Browns situation. He acts like it's some kind of disaster that they drafted both Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur. But then he admits that he thinks Shedeur is better than Dillon Gabriel. So if you think he's the better player, wouldn't you want your team to take him? The funniest part of Colin's entire rant is when he starts talking about how this is all about culture and how the NFL is protective of its culture. But then he turns around and praises teams like the Browns for just saying go compete. So which is it, Colin? You want teams to be protective of their culture? Or do you want them to just throw everyone in a room and let them compete? Here's what I think really happened. And this is where Colin's entire argument falls apart. I think Colin heard some rumors and gossip during draft season, decided to run with it without doing his homework, and now he's trying to justify his position even though it doesn't make sense. The proof is in how he keeps contradicting himself throughout the entire segment. He'll criticize Shedeur for one thing, then praise him for another. He'll say teams were turned off by Deion's comments, then admit that he thinks Shedeur is a franchise quarterback. He'll complain about the celebrity backup issue, then say he has no problem with the Browns drafting him. What really gets me is how Colin completely ignores the context of Shedeur's situation. This is a kid who transferred to Colorado to play with his dad, helped turn around a struggling program, dealt with constant media attention and criticism, and still managed to put up incredible numbers. That takes mental toughness and leadership, exactly the qualities Colin claims to value in quarterbacks. And let's talk about those numbers for a second, because this is where Colin's argument really falls apart. Shedeur threw for over 4,000 yards and 37 touchdowns in his final season at Colorado. He had one of the highest completion percentages in college football. He was clutch in big moments and showed incredible poise under pressure. But Colin wants to ignore all of that because of some anonymous reports about interviews. The truth is, Colin got caught up in the media narrative about Shedeur and didn't do his own homework. He heard what other people were saying and just ran with it instead of actually analyzing the kid's play and potential. That's not good journalism. That's just lazy commentary. What makes this even worse is that Colin has a platform and influence. When he goes on his show and spreads these kinds of narratives, it can actually hurt a young player's career. That's real-world consequences for what amounts to gossip and speculation. But here's where I think Colin really messed up. And this is where the instant regret part of our title comes in. I think Colin realized after the fact that he went too hard on Shedeur without having the facts to back it up. He got caught up in the moment and said things he probably wishes he could take back. The reality is that Shedeur Sanders is going to have every opportunity to prove his doubters wrong in Cleveland. He's going into a situation where he can compete for playing time, learn from veterans like Joe Flacco, and show what he's really made of. And when he does, and I believe he will, Colin's going to look pretty foolish for all these comments. From what I've seen of Shedeur throughout his college career, this kid has the mental toughness to handle criticism and the talent to succeed at the next level. He's been dealing with doubters his entire life, and he's consistently proven them wrong. I don't see why the NFL would be any different. So Colin, if you're watching this, maybe next time do your homework before you go on national TV and tear down a young player's character based on anonymous sources and gossip. Shedeur Sanders has worked too hard and overcome too much to be dismissed based on rumors and speculation. What do you guys think about Colin's take on Shedeur? Are you buying into the narrative that he had terrible interviews? Or do you think this is just another example of the media creating drama where none exist? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button because we're going to be following Shedeur's entire NFL journey. And I've got a feeling it's going to be a lot more successful than Colin Cowherd thinks it will be.